Good morning. I'm Jeff Stevens, the CEO and co-founder of Context AI. I have here with me two of my co-founders, Dr. Sasha Jumbe and Dr. Sean Caffey. We're a data science company that has invented a new type of electrodiagnostics. We are able to identify ultimately diagnostically every sound, vibration, electrical impulse and field in the human body. This project started when I knocked on a door at Stanford Medicine and proclaimed that I could identify a fetal heart defect in utero in the 10th to 12th week of life. But as a layman, I had no idea how to do the last mile they call medicine. And I asked if anyone would help me. It turns out there were many. And the first of them, or among the first of them, was a world-renowned cardiologist. And he helped me understand that while my goal was to start in maternal fetal care, that because of the richness of data and understanding of the mature heart, that it was best if we started in adult cardiology. So much as humans peer into the heavens with their eyes, they can only see visible light. So other humans went and created additional sensors to be able to bring richer data to those humans to understand. We follow in their footsteps and climb on their shoulders and do the same thing in medicine. So let me take you on our journey and show you our two sensors. The first is a vibroacoustic sensor. The most interesting things to note are here are the sounds of the human heart and the sounds of the lungs and guts. But most importantly is the threshold of audibility. No doctor, no matter how elite, can hear anything to the left of this line. This is one of our digital biomarkers. You're looking at a single human heartbeat. And to help us understand this idea of the richness of data, we've superimposed the threshold of audibility. So I ask you along with me to look into your mind's eye and ask yourself what percentage of the data that we have of a single heartbeat is today completely unavailable to a doctor for analysis. Our sensor is highly accurate. Its -3 dB point is 0.2 hertz. And the round tables, I will actually show you our current version. It's smaller than your thumbnail. So we also have a bioelectric sensor. And we're looking here, and as we know, the body has a bunch of highways that neurons or electricity goes across to control everything that happens. This is especially important in the heart. So here we're looking at a typical ECG or electrocardiogram. And here we're looking at our data. You can see how much sharper, crisper, and richer it is. But let me draw your attention here to this blown up picture of ours, and this little H, that bump is called H-wave. So among the things that control a heart are a bunch of neural pathways called the bundle of His. Today, for a doctor to get data from the bundle of His, they have to insert a sensor-laden catheter up through an artery and into the heart and take data from inside the heart. Ladies and gentlemen, this data is from our sensor applied to the outside of a human body. This is just one of the many game-changing examples of what we can do. So to do something like this, so can we cover that in a moment? Thanks. We will cover that for you. So to do this, a project like this, you need an incredible team of people. So myself, I'm a computer scientist. I'm credited with creating the first known in-memory database, which is the highest performing database architecture we have. I'm a recording engineer who specialized in microphones, and I have the honor of being the chairman of a Stanford event on deep learning. Dr. Sasha Jumbe, our chief data scientist, is currently the leader of the largest healthcare data science initiative on Earth. He works at the Gates Foundation, where he leads a team of 146 data scientists. And Dr. Sean Caffey is a two-time novel medical device CEO who's raised over $100 million in strategic funding and has already had 2 successful exits. And last but certainly not least is Adam Bieberg. Adam is a world-renowned distributed computer scientist. The largest distributed AI platform on Earth is his architecture. He was also the head of development for Apple, for HealthKit, ResearchKit, and the Apple Watch. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Shasha Jumbe.
From the question, it sounds like you're already wondering what the sensor looks like. So I'll answer that question now. This is what the sensor looks like when it's placed on the heart to collect cardiopulmonary data. We could stop the presentation right now because this is a great product by itself, as you've already heard. But we're not interested in just a great product. We're interested in disruptive technology. And our disruption comes back from the data science. Collecting these novel data from the heart requires us to be able to compress in a lossless way the massive amount of data that we're collecting because we're sampling at 192,000 cycles per second. And that data is being transferred over in a compliant way to a platform that leverages all the great improvements that are happening in neural networks. Because our data is so beautiful, and you're really turning all this biological data into a big signal processing experiment that sits right in the middle of all the great work that's happening in data science between digital imaging analysis as well as text analysis. Our innovation in this space is to actually take advantage of all the different algorithms that are being developed using ensemble methods. So rather than actually saying that we're going to use one specific method, we're going to combine all these different methods, including hierarchical statistical methods, so that we can make inference and also start learning a lot more and asking and answering the question why it is that we have these signals, especially for tachycardia. And we are also going to be innovating where we are moving our data science across the firewalls that you see in healthcare, rather than moving the data itself. And this will give us access to electronic health records as well. And we should be able to send out early alerts to individuals as part of our diagnostic reporting. Probably doesn't take much imagination for you to think about if we're going to de-space that this platform could actually become an early closed-loop medicine prototype where the learning that is done in the data science is actually also informing what data needs to be collected, so that you're continuously increasing collection of the right kind of data, not just any kind of data. This is going back to our heartbeat images. And what you see here is that because we're sampling so frequently, you have a massive amount of data, but it's also deep data because you're crossing that auditory level threshold. And since your heartbeat, every single heartbeat that you have, is very similar to the last one, but not exactly the same, we can also start learning about the within individual variation, as well as when we start looking across populations, we start understanding about between individual variation in this patterning and changes that can be used to generate these digital biomarkers. And what you see here is that we don't really necessarily need to depend on neural networks to find out some of these biomarkers, because the sensors are so great. You're actually seeing that in the exercise tachycardia heartbeat that is being shown there on the left, that the pulmonary valve has actually shifted significantly to the left, and there's also desynchrony in all the sound waves that you're seeing across the valves. This is a good indicator that some of these biomarkers will actually be self-evident, so we actually don't need to use very difficult math at all. And if math is something that you don't like, you can actually see the data that we're talking about when you look and come over to our breakout sessions and really feel the type of data that we're talking about that can be handled efficiently with a computer, but a human cannot actually hear anything right now. Thank you. So our solution is a $40 patch connected to the cloud, where we've designed advanced sensors specifically for machine learning that are able to harvest robust data sets across broad populations and patient demographics in order to diagnose and ultimately predict problems before they occur. Our first product is a sensor array that is 100% passive. We do not impart any energy to the human body. So this is a very safe device, specifically a non-significant risk device. Where ultimately, we have a reusable and disposable component, where a $40 cost of goods sold for the system includes a $30 electronics module that gives wireless connectivity, a microcontroller, as well as measures a patient's position and at altitude as they go up and down stairs. This is really important for informing on systems biology. We snap this into a disposable patch that contains our sensors, and this can all be essentially repurposed, networked together for different areas on the torso, including fetal maternal monitoring and a reusable vest for NASA, where we're able to measure every sound, vibration, and electrical impulse in the human torso. And ultimately, this informs us in our ability to predict disease, and we have the ability to disrupt a $121 billion cardiopulmonary market, for example. Our ability and our goal of 98+% accuracy in predicting diagnostic diseases allows us, for example, to go right to the source and prevent hospital readmissions, such as in the case of congestive heart failure, where right now, as a physician, if I want to know if you've got congestive heart failure, we listen with a stethoscope to your lungs to see if you have fluid in your lungs. We're able to pick up all the sounds of the cardiac output, as well as the valves, and really the cardiopulmonary system as you walk upstairs and downstairs, and that's truly how we diagnose cardiopulmonary disease today when combined with the electronic health record. And we'll talk about our data sciences in a moment. But it's just not just the cardiopulmonary market. We have another $100 billion market opportunities that we can disrupt as well, including anesthesiology, where in the OR, the stethoscope is one of the most used tools by an anesthesiologist. We have the ability, ultimately, to identify causes of adverse outcomes for early interventions before they occur, as well as ultimately use smart alarms and augmented reality to predict patient safety issues during surgery. OBGYN, our ability to measure the fetal heart rates, and ultimately, for NASA, our ability to measure baseline astronauts here on Earth and compare to that change in digital biomarkers as they go to space, combined with our population data, allows us ultimately to predict and disrupt primary care and make a very compelling tool for your mission to Mars. We have a well-protected platform with 4 patents. We use an integration of electronic health records where we move data science across firewalls, not the data. And ultimately, we have a distribution and licensing business model where we will partner with leading distributors in the technologies of the previous slide that I mentioned. And ultimately, an example, iRhythm, a company that uses a disposable patch simply for monitoring the EKG and arrhythmias, is able to sell $399 diagnostic reports. It's currently enjoying $85 million of sales today per year. We'll talk more about the details of our pro forma and how we make money in the coming roundtable, but I'd like to point out the opportunity of this is within 5 years, really just the cardiopulmonary market turned over $500 million in revenue. And we'll talk more about our value proposition to the payers, providers, and patients in the coming breakout sessions. But I'd like to point out in particular that we can do design studies looking at edema in astronauts as they go from ground to low microgravity environments. Our scientific advisory board includes the chief of cardiology at UCSF, Jeff Hogan and Ethan Weiss, and we've partnered with Flextronics to provide our contract manufacturing of our go-to-market device. And I can leave you with ultimately our timeline. We can discuss. We'll be in market for a 510K approval within 18 months. And the last message, ultimately, that we're breaking new ground here for accelerated go-to-market path in our ability to generate revenue quickly with an extraordinary interdisciplinary team to help NASA's mission in long missions to Mars. Thank you.
So it's an IP66 environment, so it's sealed, and our technology rejects motion artifacts. And to extend the question to the bioelectrics, unlike the typical ambulatory cardiac patches like from iRhythm that are very much affected by perspiration, because we're a totally different technology, we are not affected by perspiration or motion artifacts with either of our sensors.
I'd like to point out as well and reinforce what Jeff said, that this is a non-contact sensor. We're measuring the changes in the electric field of the body, and therefore we're not affected by perspiration, but rather we can interpret these changes in electric field into EKGs in addition to much broader data analytics, which is really poised towards machine learning, and just like Jeff said, beyond what we're traditionally used to with a visual telescope, but offers multiple tools and insights for machine learning and analytics.
How benign does the environment have to be? In other words, if there's a lot of noise or vibration, does that affect your...
I can comment that, first maybe I'll comment about the patient data that we've measured to date. So we'll talk more about the timeline and our milestones that we've achieved in the breakout sessions, but we just met our first milestone, and that is starting clinical studies earlier this month in June, where we've measured 15 patients. The data itself, we have the ability to really measure vibroacoustic interface, and what that means is from the heart is generating pressure waves, and our ability to really pick up sounds within the torso differentiates ourselves from a traditional diaphragm stethoscope, for example. In addition, I think the really powerful attributes of this is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, and our ability to essentially use the same type of technology that Google voice recognition uses now, and our ability to use neural nets and screen out background noises in Starbucks, for example, you've seen tremendous advances in voice recognition in a cafe in just even the last 5 years. And it's because of Dr. Jumbei's expertise in deep learning and particularly machine learning. And Jeff can probably answer.
So I'll take it a step further. So where a number of our patent issues are, or our patent concepts, is in the nature of the vibroacoustic sensor and how it's constructed. And so it rejects all of the information that's not proximal to where it's placed. And this is why we can litter a vest with sensors, both bioelectric and vibroacoustic. It's picking up the pistonic motion. And so it's highly directional. So yes, we do pick up ambient noise. And in fact, I'll share with you that in our clinical trials, we were in a clinic that was active and very noisy, and our results were still very, very pleasing.
Question for you on the sampling rate. Obviously, when you're in diagnostic mode, the more data is better. Does that affect battery life? And if it does, is there a means to maybe scale down the sampling rate to some quiescent mode, and then if you see an anomalous behavior, ramp it back up? Just thinking to extend the performance without recharging.
I actually love that question. We'll discuss it more in the roundtables because it's rather proprietary what we do. But our data stream is 180 kb coming off the patch for each of the two sensors. And and to put it in perspective on a relative basis, we're acquiring 192 kilohertz per second off the vibroacoustic sensor during clinical trials and 50 kilohertz off the bioelectric.
These guys don't let me talk a lot. But I think another additional element for data science in this space is that we would like to be able to ramp down the sampling rate if we can. So design of experiments is going to be a big thing that we add to this, and that we want to optimize the sampling rates. And when we are collecting, and actually back to the other question in terms of noise, is that we also want to intentionally add noise to the system to make sure that it's resistant as part of the data science and learning as well.
So I understand your presentation is geared at having a sensor that is diagnostic in nature and being able to determine, set a baseline, determine changes from the baseline and such. But we've talked a lot about this thing operating in acoustically noisy environments, but how does it work in a biologically noisy environment? Someone running on a treadmill, or someone who is exercising, or in our case maybe in an EVA suit doing external processes on installing something. Does this still operate in those noisy environments where you have a lot of muscles that work at one time?
So this goes to some of the experimentation that we're going to have to do to make sure that we actually understand the thresholds of what kind of noise the system can manage. But my impression right now is, given the fact that you have at least two sources of information that are coming in, the vibroacoustics as well as the bioelectric, and if you actually converge around the biomarkers that we're talking about sound as if they're actually coming from the separate sources, but we can actually combine those signals so that you have a lot more information by looking across bioelectric and vibroacoustic as well. And as I was saying, in terms of the types of experiments that we want to be doing is to ramp up the amount of noise, add intentional noise to see if our data science still picks up where the signal-to-noise ratio is being reduced as much as possible.
So first I brought up the two pictures again that Shasha used, which is a normal heart. And this is the same patient 4 minutes later on an exercise bike. So this was during our preclinical trials, which we can all laugh was in my home. And so this was my exercise bike he was on, and the 80s has asked for its exercise bike back. And it was very, very noisy. So you'll have to take my word for that. But that was my biggest concern, was how noisy an 80s generation bicycle was, right? And you can see this was 4 minutes after this was when that was taken. And oh, by the way, if you're curious, this was who we call patient zero. This was the very first biomarker we produced with our system. And I guess I'll add a little bit. We've all grown up in the area of noise cancellation, and we have deep learning to thank for the concept of injecting noise into a neural network to teach it how to eliminate the noise. So we're literally climbing on the backs of people that have invented so much before us. And in fact, I'm very proud to tell you, it's actually in our white paper that while we have the patents on the vibroacoustic sensor, the bioelectric sensor was first patented by NASA and JPL in the 70s. We climb on your shoulders. And NASA is expert in signal-to-noise ratio. Just think about getting a signal back from Mars. And the reason why it took decades to take that beautiful invention that NASA and JPL thought up to market was because the signal-to-noise ratio, there's so little signal relative to all the noise from your invention. And so it took decades to be able to extract that signal effectively. But as we've shown you, we can pick up H-wave from the surface of the body.
Yes, speaking about signal-to-noise ratio, are there any defined use cases yet for the data to the left of the curve?
Oh, by definition, this is all useful data. So the stuff to the left of the curve is just what humans can't interpret using their personal sensors. So all of this goes into our neural networks, or our machine learning. They're not just neural networks, as Shasha pointed out. So we pick up everything in the box that I showed you.
And some of, like a high-level use case, something where you would make it tangible.
So right now, the use of a stethoscope, and essentially to the right of the line is what physicians use to pick up a murmur, for example. Our really business model is around using not just the stethoscope that was built 200 years ago for humans, but to use and invent as one subsystem this vibroacoustic sensor built for machines. So we're listening to a broader spectrum. But it's really not just, this is not a stethoscope as what we're selling here. This is a mobile wearable patch that brings in a multitude of information uses artificial intelligence to make this one part of the spectrum that we're listening to, in addition to aligning each heartbeat with their EKG, so we know at what point in the cycle, based on the data rhythms, as well as the position and whether the patient just walked up 2 flights of stairs, for example, and if they have fluid in the lungs because of that. So we're using, in addition to these primary sensors, we're bringing in the longitudinal health record for the last 5 years of what patients' medications they're on, what patients' hospitalizations has been, and really what I'm talking about is an active physician monitoring this patient, but in a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week effort, where as a physician, we're a summation of the patterns that we've seen in our career, and we're able to train our neural networks towards, instead of maybe 3,000 patients that I would see, 30,000 patients within the next couple of years.
If I can just add, the way that I understand your question is that we know what the signal to the left means, and now we've got all this additional signal that we're generating, and my take on that is that we don't know what those signals really mean right now, but our job is to actually figure out whether we can raise the sensitivity and specificity of prediction using that additional signal, so that we now going to be able to actually differentiate between mitral valve prolapse and which is benign because of whatever is going on at that moment, or it actually means something, and being able to detect much earlier than we are currently able to detect right now.
And I'll take it a step further. Our patent isn't published, but I'll share with you one of my favorite parts of it. So these digital biomarkers are referred to by some doctors as phenotypic fingerprints. And our system allows phenotypes to declare themselves. This isn't, because we're closed-loop evidence-based medicine, we're not about the subjectivity of humans, no matter how elite a doctor or a researcher, saying this is what this means. And we put one example in our patent application, and that is, go ask any gastroenterologist what percentage of his or her female patients that have irritable bowel syndrome also complain of lower back pain. And the lowest number we've heard is 70%. So by putting a vest on a person, or just a patch on their gut and a patch on their back, we will be able to prove the correlation between irritable bowel syndrome and lower back pain, an undisclosed disease. So phenotypes, for the first time ever, will get to declare themselves. And it's my belief, but I'm a layman, that we will explore with NASA and find some really interesting fundamental systems biology. And that's why we want to start with edema, because we think that's potentially low-hanging fruit, and we know it's an existing problem today. We believe that there's a very good chance, no promise, but a good chance, that we can identify when during the flight up to ISS the edema begins to happen. And so imagine if we figure out that it's just before max Q. Well, the countermeasure that would likely be informed is to put more fuel on the rocket and bring back max Q, lower it. It could be that simple. I'm not predicting that. I'm saying it could be. And that's the journey we want to take with NASA. So with NASA, our ask is very simple. Let us come get data from your astronaut corps. We're not looking for money at all. And let us help you explore what the cause of edema might be. Thank you very much.